Hey, what's going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. Now today we're looking at a 1994 Volvo 850 Turbo. And for those that don't know, this car is slowly becoming a cult classic. I don't know if it's maybe the Swedish boxy but soft lines, maybe the fact that it's a station wagon and it makes it super practical, or just the fact that these cars are very reliable and they can be known for going hundreds of thousands of miles with no major issues. But there's a little bit of a charm to these cars that I think is kind of overlooked, especially due to the fact that the 850 Turbo is not the most desirable of this chassis. As we all know, the 850R is the unicorn that is very difficult to find, and if you have one, congratulations, because you probably have one of the coolest Volvos ever made. Not to say that this car isn't cool or anything, because it definitely is. And even just seeing it right now as it's been all cleaned up, it looks great. I mean, there's something about original paint that you really don't get to capture on film, but when you see it in real life, you can really just take a moment to appreciate it. And all I really wanted to do today was just take this car out for a quick spin and just kind of give you guys an overview of the inside as well as the outside. And usually when I do these sort of reviews, I start on the front, but I think for this, I actually want to start on the back, because I think it's really impressive how this car can stay its size and still have so much room in the back. I mean, if you fold down these seats, no joke, you could sleep in this car very comfortably. Even if you didn't fold down the seats and you're a smaller human, you could definitely do that. Or if you had a dog, this would be a great place for the dog to go and just run about, and you can have a whole family still in the car. And as we live in a world now with SUVs and crossovers, it's really refreshing to come back to a car that is just purely a station wagon and doesn't try to hide it behind any other identity, right? So when you get into the back seats, there's nothing much to see here. What I will say is the leather in these cars is so plush. Something that I really don't get to see in like the newer cars, like the 90s cars. When it comes to like the leather interiors, it's so plush. And one thing that I did want to point out too that I thought was just really fascinating, that I've never really seen in any other 90s car, is an armrest, right? Doesn't look like anything out of the ordinary, but when you pull this up, it's an integrated booster cushion that you'll only find in the US. And it has these clear instructions on how you can connect a booster seat. And this is just, I don't know, this is just a nice touch and something I didn't really see, and I almost overlooked it when I was taking a look in the back seats, and just thought it was cool to point out. And you could feel really confident, putting a child in the back seat of a Volvo, because for the most part, Volvos have been known for their safety. And that's one thing that is really worth pointing out, especially with this car in particular. As we all know, Volvos are known to last for a long time, and you can feel confident being behind the wheel, because if you, God forbid, ever got in an accident, you would know that the car, for the most part, would keep you safe. Let's take a little look in the front seats. And as you can see right off the bat, one thing that I did want to mention with this car is you can see that the leather is cracking on the front seats. And for any other 850 owners out there, this is a very common thing that you'll see. It's just the normal wear and tear. The leather, it will get dry and brittle and it'll start to crack, and that could just be from the previous owners and things of that sort. But it's very common to see that, especially on 90s cars like this. But it definitely doesn't take away from the comfort at all, because when you get in these seats, trust me, like I wish there was a way that you guys could sit with me in the passenger seat, but these seats are supremely comfortable. And what's so refreshing too is when you get behind the wheel of this, everything is so analog, everything is very legible. I mean, look at the speedometer. It just makes so much sense, right? As we are into the new cars now that have the digital displays, and there's so many things going on, it's telling you the miles per gallon and all that stuff. It's so nice to just be able to come back to a car that is just so painfully simple that anybody could really even figure it out. And even with some other Swedish cars, you'd be kind of scratching your head wondering what everything is about. But with this car, it's very simple. It's very laid out. You would be able to understand everything that's going on, even with this very 2000s stereo with the USB stick. I think it's kind of funny that there's also the CD player too. But you know, with that being said, everything here is here for a reason. It's a very practical car. And I think that these cup holders are absolutely hilarious. They're so delicate that I feel like even one latte on this, and then you apply too much pressure, you probably will spill all over the place. But we'll have to try the experiment for next time. So let's just fire this thing up. Oh, little steering lock. So underneath the hood of these cars is a 2.3 inline 5-cylinder. So it's not a 4-cylinder, it's a 5-cylinder. And of course it's turbocharged. And I don't know if this actually is reading a specific amount of pressure, or if this is just kind of like a dummy gauge to tell you that the turbocharge is engaged, like it's building up pressure. But so the specs, when it first came in 1994, this car supposedly made 222 horsepower and 221 pound-feet of torque. And you know, by today's standards, that's still very impressive. And especially for the time, that's a properly quick car, especially for a station wagon like this. But it doesn't command you to want to utilize all 222 horsepower all the time. I would say for the most part, this car is very tame, and you wouldn't really think of it as like a performance-oriented vehicle. I think only in the situations where you push it to its absolute limit is where you really get to enjoy it and see it for what it is a sporty station wagon. But I mean, right off the bat, as soon as you set off, you can definitely feel a little bit of zippy and peppiness into it. Doesn't feel like a conventional 850. If you ever driven the 850, it definitely does feel very down on power. And this car has 204,000 miles on it. And you know, for the most part with these 850s, it's going to be very hard for you to find a low mileage 850. And it's just due to the fact that the people just drive them. You know, this is a great daily driver, and you could do so many different things with it that it would make sense for people to just keep driving it into the ground. And for most Volvo enthusiasts out there, they're very good with taking care of their cars. So it's not like, you know, like a Subaru WRX where you're kind of rolling the dice and you're not sure what you're getting into. I've come to find that usually Volvo enthusiasts, even though they have very high mileage vehicles, they're very good about keeping up with the maintenance and making sure that they can keep the car on the road and keep it going for a long period of time. And I definitely feel that when driving this car. I mean, with 204,000 miles, of course there's like little squeaks and rattles and things from the interior, but everything for the most part feels really solid. The steering is on point. It doesn't veer off to the left or right. The acceleration feels really nice. It's very subtle. It doesn't demand you to drive it fast. It's just there in case you want to drive it fast, you know? And it doesn't feel very large. You know, if you get into like an SUV or something, it could feel like it's almost teetering and tottering in some instances. But since this car is pretty low to the ground, you know, in its classic station wagon styling, I mean, it feels almost like just like a saloon, you know, with a little bit of extra baggage in the back. And on this beautiful summer's evening, cruising around in this Volvo, I mean, it doesn't really get any better than this. And I think for a little bit more light, we can pop open the little moonroof it's got up top here. And that's the thing too with this car, is it's very well equipped. This car has all the bells and whistles that you can get from the 90s. It's got the remote keyless entry, it's got power windows, power locks, it's got cold AC. Volvo's heated seats are some of the best in the biz. For those that don't know, especially even the older school cars, man, they are so hot that they'll burn your butt off. And even with the heater too, just in general, you can imagine just Swedish conditions. Of course, they want to have their cars be able to, you know, provide some warm heat, especially in really cold conditions. And let's see what happens when I put my foot into it a little bit. Yeah, and that's the thing is, typically with turbocharged cars, there's gonna be a amount of turbo lag that you're gonna feel. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. And especially in the 90s, for the most part, most turbo cars, there's gonna be that lag, but once it comes on, maybe around like a little past 3,500 RPM, is when the engine will start to wake up, and then that's when it starts to make sense, like, oh, this car is actually pretty quick. But anything below that, it just kind of feels like you're putting around town, and for the most part, that's what people are gonna be using this for. I mean, you can't really push too hard on a car that's got over 200,000 miles. So we're just gonna drive it for what it is and just kind of enjoy the classic Volvo drive, as you may. Thank you. And I would love to one day find one of these cars with a manual transmission, because I feel like the manual transmission would really unlock the full potential of the inline 5. And what's so cool about an inline 5 too is if you ever put any sort of exhaust system on them, it has a very distinct noise that not many other internal combustion engines will make. You know, it's almost like the inline 6, but it's like the middle child, right? You have one less cylinder, but it makes for such a cool noise. Not like a VR6 or anything like that, but I would say something like a good blend in between that. Very hard to explain. It's something maybe you guys will just have to look up on your own, but trust me, when you see one that's properly done, especially with the manual transmission, these cars look absolutely sweet. And I'll say that if you're gonna choose the saloon or the wagon, I mean, it's a pretty obvious choice. You want to take the wagon for sure. But as the years go by, these are definitely getting harder and harder to find. Not to say that they're impossible to find, but to find one in really good shape that, you know, has the potential to keep going for a really long time, is you might have to hunt for it a little bit. But if you're gonna ask me if this car is worth buying, I would say 100%. I mean, this is a very pleasant drive. I mean, it is so smooth. This car really glides. You know, you're gonna get a little bit more interior cabin noise, you know, just for station wagons in general. Just as a rule of thumb, you are gonna get a little bit more cabin noise just because of the aerodynamics of the car, especially with this boxy shape that it is. But it's nothing that would drive you nuts. It's just something that you need to get used to. Try putting my foot into it again a little bit. Oh. Let's see here. The thing is, I honestly don't want to drive this car that fast. I'm really just enjoying just cruising. Like, I would love to just take this car on the highway, turn the cruise control on, and just go for hours and hours and hours. Like, this would definitely be the road trip car. And then when it's all said and done, if you really needed to, you could just leave all your stuff in the back and have like a little sleeping bag and sleeping situation in the back, fold down the seats, and you're all good. So this could double up as a little car camper too. You know, it's not gonna be like a full camper van or anything like that, but still, for what it is, there's a lot of potential with it. And we're going to be coming up on some twisties here, and that'll give us a chance to really utilize the suspension and kind of feel the handling characteristics of this car. And given that it's front wheel drive, I'm gonna assume that it's gonna understeer, but I guess we'll just have to see. Steering wheel has a really nice 9-3 grip, even though it's literally like a square in the middle. Feel very at ease. Okay, so we're gonna hit a little bit of some twisties here, and I just want to see how the suspension handles these corners. Brakes feel really good. Oh yeah. Wow, that's actually pretty impressive. Like I said, it feels like a sporty saloon, but just with a little bit of extra baggage in the back. still feels very capable, very solid. The brakes are a little bit on the soft side. I can see if you're driving this for a long period of time that it could be different, but it really holds its own. It did understeer there a little bit, just a little bit. So I would assume if you were driving this in harsher conditions and you're really pushing the car to its limits, that it would continue to do that. But that's just a basic handling characteristic of most front-wheel drive cars, so that's nothing really out of the ordinary. Let's loop around real quick. But like I said, very pleasant to drive. Really fun. You just give it a little bit of gas, the turbo wakes up the engine, and off you go. Very direct steering. It's got a nice weight to it. You kind of have to work for it. And it's kind of dead on center, but once you load it up, it feels very responsive. Given that this car is pretty low, I wouldn't really recommend it if you're going to be taking it up to the mountains or anything like that. I just personally think that you would need a little bit more ground clearance if you really wanted to take this car more seriously for like some car camping or something like that. But I think it's just like a daily driver that you could drive in the city and maybe do some car camping if you really wanted to. I think the potential is definitely there. Could make for a really nice street build. I mean, this platform is great for it. And there you have it. So let me know down in the comments down below what you think about this car. But I think with that being said, thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.